killing a police officer is a capital felony, punishable by the death penalty or life imprisonment without the possibility of release. It is one of 9 capital felonies. For anyone convicted of a capital felony, the law requires a separate sentencing hearing before a judge or jury to weigh mitigating and aggravating factors. The judge or jury cannot impose the death penalty, and must sentence the person to life imprisonment without the possibility of release, if the mitigating factors outweigh or are of equal weight to the aggravating factors, or if any of 4 automatic bars to the death penalty exist. After a person is convicted of a capital felony, the judge or jury considering whether the court should impose the death penalty must determine and state in a special verdict whether one or more aggravating factors outweigh one or more mitigating factors and the existence of any automatic bars to the death penalty. If the mitigating factors outweigh the aggravating factors, or are of equal weight, the court must sentence the defendant to life imprisonment without the possibility of release. If the aggravating factors outweigh the mitigating factors, the sentence is death. The jury or court must determine if a particular factor concerning the defendant's character, background, history, or the nature and circumstances of the crime is mitigating, considering all the facts and circumstances of the case. Mitigating factors are not defenses or excuses but are factors which, in fairness and mercy, tend either to extenuate or reduce the defendant's blame for the offense, or otherwise provide a reason for a sentence less than death. The jury or court must determine if a particular factor concerning the defendant's character, background, history, or the nature and circumstances of the crime is mitigating, considering all the facts and circumstances of the case. Mitigating factors are not defenses or excuses but are factors which, in fairness and mercy, tend either to extenuate or reduce the defendant's blame for the offense, or otherwise provide a reason for a sentence less than death. In Texas, capital murder is the only felony that is eligible for the death penalty. Section 19.03 of the Texas Penal Code describes some instances that may be classified as capital murder, such as the murder of a police officer or fireman while acting in an official capacity, intentionally taking a life in the course of another felony such as kidnapping, burglary or aggravated sexual assault, murder for hire, murder committed during a prison escape, any killing by an offender who is serving a life sentence, the murder of a child less than 15 years of age, murdering a judge as a form of retaliation, multiple killings in a single act or series of related acts. Amongst the convicts who killed officers was Ruiz Wesley Lynn. He was born November 20, 1979. Ruiz Wesley Lynn received the death penalty on July 16, 2008. At the age of 29, his education level was 11th grade. Ruiz was the second inmate put to death this year in Texas, and the fourth in the U.S. 7 other executions are scheduled in Texas for later this year, including one next week. Nearly 16 years ago, Ruiz led officers on a high-speed chase after being spotted driving a car that matched the description of one used by a murder suspect. Ruiz fired one shot at Officer Mark Nix when the officer tried to break the vehicle's passenger window after the chase. The bullet hit Nix's badge, splintered it and sent fragments into his neck, severing an artery. He later died at a hospital. At his trial, Ruiz testified he was afraid for his life when he fired in self-defense on Nix after the officer allegedly threatened to kill him. He also said he believed police fired their weapons first. "I didn't try to kill the officer. I just tried to stop him," Ruiz testified. Ruiz also said he fled from police that day because he had illegal drugs in his car and had taken drugs. Officer Nix was just 33 years. He was a U.S. Navy veteran of Operation Desert Storm. Officer Nix had been on the Dallas force for nearly 7 years and was engaged to be married when he was killed. On March 23, 2007, Ruiz Wesley Lynn was sentenced to death for killing Officer Nix. Ruiz Wesley Lynn spent 16 years on Texas death row. The U.S. Supreme Court, earlier Wednesday, February 1, 2023, declined an appeal from Ruiz's attorneys to halt the execution. The defense had argued that jurors relied on overtly racist and blatant anti-Hispanic stereotypes in appraising whether Ruiz posed a future danger, an element needed to secure a death sentence in Texas. Ruiz was Hispanic. In court documents filed late Tuesday, 31 January 2023, with the Supreme Court, the Texas Attorney General's office said Ruiz's claim of juror bias had no merit because a review of the allegations conducted last week by Dallas County District Attorney John Cruzat found no such bias. One of the jurors accused of bias by Ruiz's attorneys told Cruzat that, "I was not nor am not biased to anyone or any race," according to the court filing. Last week, U.S. District Judge David Godbee in Dallas denied a request to stay Ruiz's execution, saying his attorneys failed to show that jurors had made statements during his trial showing overt racial bias. On Monday, the 30th of January 2023, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals also denied a similar stay request on claims of racial bias. The appeals court did not consider the merits of the claim, but rejected it on procedural grounds. Ruiz's attorneys previously argued unsuccessfully that an expert witness for the prosecution falsely testified at the 2008 trial about Ruiz being an ongoing threat. His attorneys alleged prosecutors knew about the false testimony, but remained silent about it. In his ruling, Godbee said the expert's testimony was quite possibly harmless, and even if it had been corrected, it would not have changed the jury's decision to sentence Ruiz to death. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles on Monday unanimously declined to commute Ruiz's death sentence to a lesser penalty. Ruiz was one of 5 Texas death row inmates who sued to stop the state's prison system from using what they allege are expired and unsafe execution drugs. Despite a civil court judge in Austin preliminarily agreeing with the claims, the state's top 2 courts allowed one of the inmates who had been part of the litigation to be executed on January 10, 2023. Prison officials deny the lawsuit's claims and say the state's supply of execution drugs is safe. Wesley Ruiz, at 43 years old, received a lethal injection at the state penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas, for the March 2007 killing of Dallas Police Senior Corporal Mark Nix. His last words were, "I would like to apologize to Mark and the Nix family for taking him away from you," Ruiz said as he was lying strapped to a gurney in the death chamber. "I hope this brings you closure." He never looked at Nix's relatives and friends, including the slain officer's mother and sister, who watched through a window a few feet from him. Ruiz thanked his family and friends for supporting him and urged his children to stand tall and continue to make me proud. "Don't worry about me. I'm ready to fly," he said. "All right, Warden, I'm ready to ride." As the lethal dose of the powerful sedative pentobarbital began taking effect, he took 2 quick breaths, then began snoring. His 11th snore was his last, and there was no further movement. 22 minutes later, at 6:41 p.m., he was pronounced dead. Immediately before his statement, a spiritual advisor standing near Ruiz offered a brief prayer. Outside the brick walls of the prison, a group of about a dozen pro-police motorcyclists sat on their bikes in the cold drizzle, revving their engines and nearly drowning out her words for those inside. Ruiz was the second inmate put to death this year in Texas, and the fourth in the U.S. 7 other executions are scheduled in Texas for later this year, including one next week. Since 1977, 1/3 of all executions in the U.S. were performed in Texas, according to the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. Although executions have significantly decreased in recent years, the fact remains that Texas is still infamous for doling out death sentences. Thank you for watching Death Row.